What's up, everybody? Casey and Chuck here on the Leadership for Life podcast. Hey, welcome to episode 27 now. 27 now, Chuck. We're moving right along, my
Right.
friend.
Yes. We're old enough to rent a car plus 2 years. So I don't know. I can't imagine a situation where it'll come to that where the podcast would become alive and have to rent a car. But, it's good to have options.
Is that the age for renting a car? Is
I think
25?
25. Well, at least it used to be. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I was not aware of that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm here, is
I
to
know. I know, man.
provide these kinds of tips.
I know. How are things
So
going?
it's going good. For those that don't live in the area, we got probably, it sure looked like a foot of snow in my house. And it took a lot of shoveling but we survived. And do you have a snowblower? Do you snow blow it?
Yeah, I don't have any time to shovel. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's a young man's game. I'm not getting out there and shoveling snow. We had over 12 inches of snow here at my house. And for those of you that don't know, Chuck and I live, what do you think, 20, 30 minutes away from one another?
Probably. Yeah. Something like that.
But here in the Omaha area where we're at, Omaha, Nebraska, that is a significant difference because
Mhm.
we really do see a totally different weather pattern within the Omaha area, depending upon what region you live in. My mom lives only 10 minutes away, and I got a considerable more amount of snow than she did.
Okay.
And we live in the same little town, but she's just up the road, but totally different snowfall. And, we'll get tornadoes down here in this area where she really doesn't have to worry about them as much. It
Yeah.
seems like my house, my neighborhood is right in
Hmm.
Tornado Alley here in Nebraska. So,
I would mention that I'm less than 5 years younger than you, and I shoveled.
did you?
No, yeah. I don't
Right.
have a snowblower. I
Right.
don't even really want a snowblower. Like I liked forced exercise where you
Do you
just
think
have to do
that's
it.
a so do you think that's a statement about physicality or intellect?
Well, probably a mixture of both.
No, I think probably
Um,
intellect.
I think.
I think probably intellect.
I
But
mean, if you had the brawn and the where you got it, flaunt it. That's what That's
yeah.
my
Is that really true though? Is it? Like I could probably drive a car with my feet, but that doesn't mean it's a good idea. You know what I mean?
um, yeah, but how do you know if that you can drive a car with your feet unless you try?
Yeah.
And now I know that I can shovel a foot of snow. Um, I I've always had this thing where, and this is morbid, and people are going to think I'm weird, but like, like watch movies and you see people like, oh, they just killed someone, and they dig a grave for the person they just killed, and I'm always like, I wonder if I could dig a grave. Like, I
Wow.
just don't know.
Wow. I hear our listeners logging off right now. At this very moment, I can hear us losing
A
listeners.
small
Why don't
percent,
we
yeah, a
huh?
small percentage though, they're right there with me, and they're
Yeah,
like, yeah.
I doubt that. But okay. I doubt that considerably. But okay. So let's move on to something a little bit more positive here. Because quite frankly, you're scaring me. What are we talking about? What are we talking about today?
So, with the change of format and with, um, just, over the passage of time, we've gained new listeners. And so I thought it might be a good idea to just kind of give an overview of what we're trying to do with this podcast, what, people should look to try to get from it, a reminder to ourselves of like you know what what's our goal, or what are we trying to do, so what do you think about that?
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. How about a little bit of an introduction about who we are too?
Hmm.
Because I think that's a great point. We are gaining listeners. In fact, I'll make the announcement right now. I just looked at the stats as I was getting on. We want to welcome
Oh.
Sweden to the Leadership for Life podcast. So we've just gained some a listener in Sweden, at least one
Hmm.
listener in Sweden. So thank you so much for joining us. If you're listening to
Yeah.
this podcast in Sweden, we noticed you. We know that you're there, and we absolutely thank you. We'd love to hear from you.
Hmm.
You can reach out to me at caseyputney.com. That's CASEY at CASEYPUTNEY.com. We'd love to get to know you. We'd love to hear from you. And that goes to all of our listeners.
Hmm.
We really would like to hear from you guys and know what you're thinking about the podcast. If you're a long time listener, we would love to hear what you think about the change in format.
Hmm.
If you have topics that you'd love for us to talk about, then send them our way. There really is not a subject that's really taboo, I think, for you and I, Chuck.
Right.
I feel really safe talking with you just about just about anything, and I think you do as well. I hope so. So we could talk just about any subject you guys send our way. If you have questions, we've done a question episode before where we actually read some questions and answered them on the podcast. So we're open to that as well. We'd love to just hear from you. Sometimes when you sit in front of these microphones, you wonder, is anyone out there? Is
Hmm.
anybody listening? And we would love to get some names and know that you're there. And as we describe the purpose of this podcast, I think you'll see that we're here to really try to help folks to have an impact on people's lives, real people, like individual people that are real, living a real life, just like Chuck and I. And we would love to know that we're having some kind of an impact, that people are actually out there. So if we could hear from you, that would be absolutely wonderful.
Very true. Very true. Yes. So why don't you give a little bit of background of for you?
Okay. My name is Casey. I guess I come from a background of organization development, leadership development, and certainly some training development. I retired from the Air Force in 2014 after completing a successful career there. Moved into some training roles and leadership development. That's really where my passion is. Along the way, I became certified as a John Maxwell speaker, coach, and trainer. For those of you that may know, it's an international name. John Maxwell is kind of a legend in the leadership development community. He creates some of the utmost just outstanding curriculum in the world. He works with political leaders all over the world, and I was lucky enough to become a part of his team and really get mentored and trained from him, but primarily the folks that surround him. We do have access to John, but John's in his 70s and he is retiring a little bit. He likes to spend some time in Florida and hang out near the water a little bit. So,
Hmm.
but that's really where I cut my teeth on leadership development. Leadership has been a passion of mine. Gosh, for many many years, over 20 years. When I was very first introduced to the term in the military on a feedback form, a supervisor of mine named Rick Rigsby wrote a leader among his peers on the feedback form. And I come from, I don't want to paint a picture that's untrue. I'll say a humble background, a somewhat troubled background, um, certainly rich with poverty, if we can say it that way, and bad decisions. So for someone to label me as leader, I was very shocked and surprised. I didn't know what it meant. I asked him, "What does this mean?" He said, "I don't know. Go figure it out." Which really began my journey of trying to figure out what the word leadership meant. And I've changed my mind about 1,000 different times until I really did find what it truly means to me. And that's when I left the military. I wanted to get into that work and really create leadership programs and talk with people about leadership and coach people about leadership. That professional journey ended up taking me to a company called Travel and Transport, where I met you, Chuck.
That's true.
There, I led a global approach to leadership development. And one of the programs I led was called Pathfinders. And that was a 6 month cohort program where we would take folks that did not supervise anyone, but had leadership potential. We would bring them into Omaha, fly them from all over the United States, fly them into Omaha for I think it was 2 days at a time. And we would go through leadership development. They'd learn about the organization, but it was really about helping individuals grow and understand that it leadership isn't dependent upon title. You can have an impact. You can have an impact on the lives of others by how you behave, by how you treat others. That was the purpose of the program. I think we were successful. Um, Within that program, as we were shutting that program down, the cohort was ending. One of my one of my messages is always, listen, you have to continue to grow. You have to continue to grow purposely. You have to try to reach your potential and continue to grow. And someone in the class said, "Well, how do we do that?" And I said, "You have to, enroll in courses, get a coach, get a mentor, find a voice that resonates with you and listen to that voice." For me, that voice is any number of people, certainly John Maxwell, Dr. King, Simon Sinek, several different voices that resonate with me that I'll continually go back to. And someone said, "Well, you're the voice for me," which is very humbling. Um, and I said, "Well, that's it for me. Like, you graduate this class, that's it. And someone challenged me to start a podcast, and then someone else in the class said, "Yeah, that's a great idea," and someone else said, "Yeah, that's a great idea." And of course, I made some excuses. I don't know how to start a podcast. I don't even know what I'd name it. No one's going to listen to this podcast. That cohort was about 25 people, I think. And while all 25 people said we would definitely listen, I knew just off of experience that not all 25 people are going to listen to the podcast. So, do I really want to start a podcast and have like 3 people listening, right?
Hmm.
So I made every excuse in the world not to do the podcast. One of the cohort members worked in HR, which shared the same kind of area with me in the building. And she really wanted me to do this podcast. She kept talking to me about it and kept talking to me about it. And I finally said, "Okay, I'll look into it and I'll think about doing the podcast." And as I sat on that and thought about it, I realized that I wasn't following what I urge everyone else to do, which is beat the fear. Like beat that fear. Don't make excuses. Don't make reasons why you can't do something. Go for it. If it doesn't work out, great. That's okay. I promise you you're going to learn something along the way. Go for it. So after having kind of those conversations with myself, I began thinking about what would I want the podcast to be. And I remember meeting with you, Chuck. Chuck was a marketing guy, and you'll get into that with travel and transport. But I had mad respect for Chuck's marketing skills, and I said, "Hey, yeah, what would the name of a great podcast be? Let's work together to create it." We talked about what I wanted it to be, and I wanted it to be for everyday people. I wanted it to be about leadership, obviously, but I wanted to help people with everyday struggles. I didn't want it to be aimed at CEOs and C-suite executives.
Hmm.
If they're listening, that's great, but it's not about becoming a better CEO. That's not what this podcast is about. This podcast is about becoming a better mother and father, husband and wife, friend, neighbor, coworker. This podcast is about getting out of your own way, right? And dealing with those limiting beliefs that we have in our head every single time we have an opportunity to grow, to reach a new level of success, to chase our potential, many of us make excuses of why we won't be successful, of why it won't happen, why the breaks go for everyone else instead of us. And I thought, what a powerful podcast if we could, if we could help people learn how to manage that self-talk and get out of their way. Chuck came with the name the Leadership for Life podcast because that's really what it is. We're talking about leadership principles, but not for just the professional organization, leadership for life. So we settled on that name and we launched the podcast. And I'll talk a little bit about the format and change in format in a minute after I fall silent here and let you kind of introduce yourself and talk about your journey a little bit with the podcast as well, Chuck.
Okay. Um, so yeah, my name is Chuck, and I have a background in marketing. And as Casey said, I was in the Pathfinders group and became friends with Casey, along with so many other great people that were in that group. And we really had a, I don't know, just a really tight knit group of people, and that was due to the people and also to Casey's ability to I don't know, through the exercises and everything else, to break down kind of the barriers between people, and so it was really a good group. I've never, achieved a level of, I've never supervised anyone. I've never managed anything other than, projects. But I've always, kind of wanted to grow and to develop as a person. And as part of that journey, it's involved some therapy and some group therapy and some individual therapy. Uh, and yeah, I think I like the intersection of where leadership and personal development and, like Casey said, kind of getting out of your own way and correcting where, those things that you say about yourself, um, within your mind. I like where all that intersects. And so, um, while I don't have any, formal leadership training, I do really enjoy the conversations that Casey and I have. Casey was nice enough to, um, be a mentor to me, particularly during this time of transition, and uh, really gotten a lot out of the things that he has kind of led me to think about and to, um, uh, just kind of recognize my own potential, and so that's kind of my story. I mean, there's lots of other stuff I could probably get into, but um, so yeah, Casey, why don't you kind of talk about or whatever you. I'm not sure if this is where you want to talk about the change of the format
Sure,
or okay.
I can. Sure. When we first started, how do you want the podcast to look, right? It's common to do interviews. And I thought, well, I could do some interviews, but how would I want those interviews to look? Who would I interview? And so forth. Not long after thinking about all of that, COVID hit. And I thought, okay, so how are we going to do these interviews? Quite honestly, I didn't really have the technical skills to figure out how to interview someone that was not in the room with me
Hmm.
and how to record it and edit it because I've got to learn all of this stuff. When we first started, I was recording and editing and posting everything. So I just really leaned on what I knew, and that was talking about leadership. And what we ended up really having is many episodes. I guess probably close to 20 episodes where it's just me and a microphone, me talking about leadership principles. These are more developed lessons where I actually sat down, put some thoughts together on paper, really wanted to have a really strong structure of what I wanted the lessons to be. You kind of get a sense of what it would be like, um, to just be in a room and hear a lecture, which isn't always the most exciting thing to go through.
Mhm.
And I knew that. So as the podcast went on, I got to think, man, I really did feel like I was sharing valuable information, like extremely valuable information. But I also felt like it was pretty heavy. The information was pretty heavy, and there wasn't a lot of laughs. And Chuck, you would continue to encourage me. You would say, "Hey, Casey, you're a funny guy. Like we've got to figure out a way to get your sense of humor to show on this podcast." And that's so difficult when it's just you and a microphone. And I wanted to create a place where you, the listener, would want to come back to. Like you'd really be excited to come back and listen and be a part of what we're talking about. And I have no doubt that people were joining and listening, to listen to the information that I was sharing. It shows the numbers are great. But I also know what it's like. You're sitting there and you're like, gosh, Casey, all right, Casey's new episode dropped. Oh, am I really ready? Am I ready for that deep of a conversation right now? Am I really ready to look at myself? Because he's going to make me look at myself. He's going to challenge me to look at myself. Am I really ready for that? And I understood that. And I really wanted to lighten things up. I wanted to create, a podcast that you enjoyed coming to. I want you to, there's times I want you to almost have a tear in your eye. I want you to get emotional about what you're thinking and feeling, but I also want you to smile. I want you to laugh. That's part of having leadership in life, is to experience all of those emotions. Chuck, you and I were meeting regularly at the time, not recording anything, and our conversations were rich and full and just amazing. And I think we said one day, like, why don't we just start recording these things? And I don't know if it was you or me. I really don't remember how it came about, but the idea was, let's just start making our podcast episodes, a recording between you and I. And let's not be afraid of any topic. Let's just dive in. We'll agree on some things, we'll disagree on others, but we always do it respectfully. And we show that two people can care about one another and not agree on everything all the time. And I think that's another underlying lesson in leadership for life that folks could take away from just about every episode. So we decided to change the format. And that's now been about, I think, about 4 episodes ago, Chuck. I could be wrong on that, but
Yeah,
about
four or
4
five.
episodes ago,
Yeah.
yeah, where we changed that format, and I love it. I think it's fabulous. I was just speaking with a listener yesterday, and who loves the change in format, who does believe I'm more right than you are,
Oh,
but does
oh,
does love does, in all seriousness, does love the change in format, and thinks it's absolutely wonderful. So I definitely think we're off to a great start of something even new. I think the podcast is getting even better as we continue to grow. So that kind of explains the change, in the format as well.
yeah. I would echo all of that. I think that for me, when I think about what the podcast is about, it's trying to encourage and help people with personal growth with through the lens of where kind of leadership is always a little bit of the framework, but like that's the ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to like help people uh, develop and grow as people, and um, that's I guess kind of how I think about it. And so there may be, in my mind, there may be episodes about like just straight up leadership ideas and concepts, and there may be ones like last episode where it was a little bit more informal and it was more about like I think, we listed out our favorite leaders, but I think we shared a lot about ourselves in who we chose and how we talked about who we chose. And so I think you're right. I think it can be wide ranging. It doesn't have to be like 5 steps to get your new promotion or the new promotion or whatever. Like it can
Yeah.
just be, whatever is kind of on our mind and um do you agree with that? Do you think that's kind of also how you envision it?
Yeah, that's exactly what I see. While leadership is definitely the foundation of this podcast, let me really explain what I mean by that. Um, a lot of times when we talk about leadership, people immediately go how we're impacting and affecting and leading others. Let me be very clear. You cannot lead anyone else until you first know how to lead yourself. You have to be a leader in your own life before you can ever lead others, right? It's just
Mhm.
not going to work long term. You might fool folks for a little bit, but eventually people see the flaws. They see that maybe you're not living up to what you're saying. People are going to see it. So that's what this is about, is reaching your full potential. Certainly there's times we'll talk about, if someone emailed me a question right now, and I think that for that one question episode we did, there was a couple questions about, hey, I'm leading a person at work and this is the challenges and the struggles. How do we how do I get there? I can tell you I can have lengthy conversations about that, certainly. But that's not what this is just about. It's about that, but it's not just about that. It's also about, you know, like I said, reaching your potential. In fact, I think that's the tagline of the podcast. I think if you look at the picture of the podcast, it says the Leadership for Life podcast, a podcast about potential. That's what we're about here, is reaching your potential as a human being in all aspects of your life. Okay, being an employee and a boss and a supervisor, that's one aspect of your life, but there's so much more to who you are as a person. When I
Mhm.
talk about potential, I'm not talking about you just getting your promotion. Certainly that's a piece of it. And I think you could take any of the conversations we've had on this podcast and apply that to your professional life. But
Mhm.
I think the magic of this podcast is that you can also apply it to your personal life. You can
Right.
also apply it to just about every aspect of your life. And I think that's the real magic of the subject matter that we're talking about.
Well, yeah, and I think once you have the set of skills and the um um it's skills, it's attitude, it's like once you have that, then it's kind of like all areas of your life will so it's not just about like learning these sets of skills in order to get the job that you want. It's about learning these sets of skills that will help you develop in your career, but will also make you a better parent, make you a better um, um, sibling, a better spouse, and so it's applying these kind of universally good practices, and then it improving all areas of your life, which I think is pretty close to what you just exactly said. But
No, I like that. I like what you just said here, how it flows back and forth and it's universal. When I taught the Pathfinders group, and Chuck, I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this. I highlighted 3 things to do to reach your potential and change your life, right? And number 1 was add value to people. Make that your goal. Like every single day, look for ways to add value to people. Second was continually grow, like purposely grow. Like look for ways to get better and search out new potential. And the third one was to solve problems. Now, I will say that in Pathfinders, I made it a very big point to say this program is not about getting a promotion. A lot of folks would apply for a program like that and think, aha, this is going to line me up for the next promotion. And I made it very clear that is not what this is about. This is not about a promotion. This is about you reaching your potential as a human being.
mhm.
Think about what it would be like if we worked in a culture where we had a whole bunch of people operating off those three principles, adding value to people, consistently and purposely growing and trying to get better and solving problems. I mean aggressively, like searching out problems and solving them, right? Most people
Yeah.
run away from problems. I want you to run towards them. If you could do those three things, you'd become a better human being. And I really do believe that 25 people were in that course. And I think a large number of people walked away with that understanding. The feedbacks tell me that. And the conversations I've had with participants afterwards tell me we were a success there. People are changing their lives more than just professionally. They're changing their lives and their relationships. They're starting new community groups. They're doing all kinds of different things. They heard the message and they're changing their lives. Now, let me tell you the secret. The secret is that while I told you it wasn't about promotion, I also gave you the absolute blueprint of how to get promoted.
Mhm.
Because if you ever go into a job interview and all of your answers to every question they give you is about adding value to people, about continuously growing and reaching your potential and running towards problems and solving them, a company would be crazy not to want that kind of individual at the next level of leadership within their company. So while I said this isn't about getting promoted, I secretly gave you the blueprint for getting promoted.
Mhm.
That's kind of what we do with this podcast is we give you some things, but it's basic and it's a foundational truth that flows into every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
Chuck, I wanted to ask you because you come towards the podcast with an interesting perspective in that you were not on the microphone when we first started. You really did start as a listener. You were doing some work on the podcast behind the scenes, but you were a listener. Did
Mhm.
you grow from the podcast in the very beginning?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. As my dog loses her mind because the mailman is here. Uh, yes. No. I learned a lot from, like there was the different laws and there were the different um, um, just kind of concepts that you were sharing about leadership. And I mean, I would talk to you about, um, after having edited a podcast and be like, hey, this one really struck home. This one really made me think. This one really, like, and so, yeah, I was definitely getting a lot out of the concepts and the stories that you were sharing. And so yeah, absolutely. And to the point where it, like I said, it really made me think about, some of the decisions I was making, or not making, like if I was too much on cruise control or and uh so yeah, I definitely got them that way, but I also recognize that within this new format, they just come out more conversationally rather than, a as you say. I mean, I don't think lecture is a little bit too strict, too kind of harsh of a word. Like you're telling stories, and like they, other than like you said, you're going to be challenged by listening to some of those, first episodes. Like it's going to ask you to ask some questions of yourself, and that can be, um I think they, I don't associate that with a lot of fun sometimes, as I think you kind of addressed. And so, um, maybe in this format, it's a little bit less of like deep therapy or whatever. Like it's a little bit more of just two guys talking, and these things come up, and so I guess that's how I would answer that question.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you got something out of them, and then you're right. Boy, I didn't pull any punches when we were bringing the thunder on those first episodes of the podcast. I was coming hard. Listen, if you want to grow, let's do it.
Mhm.
Like, and we're in the middle of a pandemic at the time, we still are, but at that time it was brand new. And listen, this is the time to grow. This is the time to really reach your potential. I felt.
Yeah.
Yeah, those episodes are wonderful. I wonder, if at some point, if we could go back, if we could, maybe on a few episodes, take those older episodes. We're at 27 now. We're so
Mhm. Right.
accomplished.
Yes.
Take some of those episodes, listen to clips of them here on air, and then talk about them and break them down a little bit in a conversational place. I think that could be somewhat beneficial as well.
For sure. Yeah. Yes. I think.
I don't know how to do that with the technology, but um,
Mhm.
yeah, I can't listen. I'll come up with the idea, Chuck. I don't know how to do it, so that would be up to you to
No
figure out how
pressure.
to do it.
Yeah. No pressure at all. Just make it happen. I don't want to know the. I don't want to know the details. Yeah. No. I think that those old ones would be good to look at um, and pull things out of and discuss in um, like kind of a real life setting. Not that that was necessarily missing, but just like um, yeah, just have a more of a kind of a conversation or conversational tone of discussing some of those concepts. I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, because in those episodes, and I know we'll continue this moving forward, but there's total transparency. Like I
Hmm.
don't hide anything. I'm very, and I think this is a great note to make for our new listeners. This podcast is very transparent. I
Hmm.
will tell you all about myself, my journey, my history, my past, and Chuck, I know you're open and willing to be transparent as well. We're
Yeah.
we're not going to really shy away from things. We
Yeah.
talked once. One of the interesting, whenever you're starting something like this, folks, a podcast or any endeavor that you're doing, you're always trying to figure out. They call it your brand, but just who you are and what you want it to be. And several times we would come back to this idea of how polished do we want this podcast to be. And if I was questioning that, Chuck was always great at reminding me this is about people. This is about impacting the lives of other people. Like we're not trying to be Joe Rogan. We're trying to just touch as many lives as possible. If that's 300, great. If it's 3,000, magnificent. But our intent is the same. And
Hmm.
sometimes Chuck would ask questions, and I would be the one to say, listen, man, we're not trying to be perfect. In fact, I think that's a great lesson. I heard Sugar, Chuck's dog, barking in the background earlier. And I think that's a great lesson for folks. Stop trying to be perfect. Some of you have an idea that you're wanting to chase right now. Some of you have a goal that you're wanting to go after. You're wanting to start a YouTube channel. Maybe you're wanting to start a podcast yourself. Who knows what you're wanting to do? You're wanting to write a book and you're thinking, oh, I got to get the certification first. Oh, I have to get the right microphone first. I have to figure out how to make my videos perfect. I've got to figure out how to have the right lighting. Folks, you don't need any of that. Just start. Thank you, Sugar. Right on cue.
Right.
Just start.
Yes.
You don't have to be perfect, folks. It's okay. Like none of us are perfect. So why do we try to be perfect when we talk to other people? We forget who we truly are. I promise you, we are all imperfect. I'm imperfect. And you know what I'm drawn to? Imperfect people.
Yeah.
I'm not drawn to people that are trying to be fake and put on a show and act like they don't make mistakes. I'm drawn to people that have dogs barking in the background. I'm drawn to people that don't know how to work their cell phones when they're trying to record themselves doing something. Like I'm drawn to people that are trying to read me a book online, but stumble over the words and just keep on moving. Like that's what I'm drawn to. Real people. And that's what we're betting on with this podcast as well. We're real guys, real dudes,
Yeah.
and we're wanting to talk to real people.
And to that point, like there have been moments like of podcasts that where like if I had to do it all over again, like a few episodes ago, like maybe I wouldn't have started talking about the Native American experience in America, right? Like where I was like, I am so far out over my skis. Like this is not. But like as I think you said that episode, like we're not trying to offend anybody. We're going to like, you know, we are driving without a map. We're gonna like roam into some areas where we're you know, where maybe I don't know about not don't belong, but like it's just going to be like a very open and spontaneous conversation, and sometimes that will involve, again, like going places where maybe that were unexpected or whatever. But like I think that's part of that. You know, when that happens, it's not like we're gonna like, oh, we just got to burn this episode and hope nobody ever hears it. You know, like we're just going to like, you know, kind of keep going and you know, hope that people realize that like there are going to be times when like maybe one of us, or namely me, is going to say something dumb, and so um or get into a territory where, you know, I don't where, you know, I have no business kind of weighing in on. And um but yeah, that's part of the transparency of what we're doing. That
Yeah,
makes
because we're growing while we're doing this
right.
podcast. We're
Yeah.
learning as we're doing this podcast. Folks, if you stay away from areas you don't know about, you're never going to grow.
Right. Yeah.
Don't be afraid to have conversations. It's the most powerful tool you have at your arsenal, no matter what aspect of life you're looking at. Have
Right.
conversations.
Yeah.
Look, maybe you talking about indigenous folks, maybe that spawns a listener to reach out that's part of that community and is
Mhm.
willing to come on here and have conversations with us and help us, understand more
Right. Right.
than what we do currently. I
Yeah.
just, I don't know. I think if you could describe this podcast as two guys who are real people, who are flawed, but genuinely have a passion and desire to help people.
Yeah.
I mean, we really do want to have an impact on the lives of other folks. We can only do that by talking about our experiences.
Hmm.
We come from two different stories, and there's going to be listeners that connect with your story. They're going to understand, Chuck, where you come from. They're going to understand the life you've led, and you're kind of a voice for them where they're saying, yeah, I understand where Chuck is coming from totally. I've been there. And then there's people that are going to resonate with my voice
Hmm.
because we're keeping it real.
Yeah.
There's an old Dave Chappelle skit about keeping it
Yeah.
real.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Let's not hope it goes quite like his skits did. But yeah, it's just us being two real guys that care about people. We're truly here to help you folks
Hmm.
in any way that we can. And the way we believe we start with that is just being transparent, being honest, and having some decent conversations.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And just parenthetically, one of the people in the conversation has a mild curiosity if he would be able to dig a grave. Like, but
Mm.
that's not going to be a huge part of the podcast, but it's also, I mean, it's there. So just,
It's there, but we'll ignore it. We'll act like it doesn't exist. Yeah, it's there, but we'll ignore it.
okay. So yeah, no, I think that is a very good, yeah, that's a very good, background of kind of who we are, what we're trying to do, what this is about. And so do you have anything that you want to add, or do you think that's pretty well covers it?
I think that covers it pretty well. It gives the background of the podcast. It tells who we are. It kind of gives you an idea of the journey of the podcast, how we've changed and morphed it. You have an idea of who we are and what our intent is, what our purpose is. The only thing I guess I would add is there's this standing commentary in the podcast that pops up every few episodes. And that is this. We started as a podcast with a guy and me who didn't own a microphone, didn't know how to do anything. And I just figured it out on my own. And Chuck joined me and helped me figure out more stuff. And together we bounced around, we stumbled our way through things. And now, two guys in Omaha, Nebraska, are listened to in now 17 different countries.
Mhm.
I pause on purpose to let that sink in. 17 different countries, folks. Never underestimate the power of your influence. Never underestimate the power of your voice. I say all that to tell you this. There's a common theme that I talk about every once in a while in this podcast. 17 different countries: England, Sweden, France, Ethiopia. Thank you for listening to us. There's one country. There's one country that we've not been able to breach
Oh,
yet.
I know where this is going.
One country that refuses to listen to the Leadership for Life podcast. One country.
Mhm.
One country that has built a proverbial wall,
Mhm.
not allowing,
Proverbial, not literal, but proverbial.
proverbial wall, not allowing us to enter their land through the airwaves.
Mhm.
Oh, sweet Canada. Where are you? Where are you, Canada? What do
Right.
we have to do? What do we have to do to get a listener from Canada? Oh, I've had listeners email me and say, Casey, I have friends in Canada. I hear your cry. I'm messaging my friends right now and telling them to listen to this podcast. It's groundbreaking. It will change your world. And they respond and they say, oh, I can't wait to listen. Still, the statistics and the data tell us not a single listener in Canada. Canada, what have I done to you?
Mhm.
Canada, what's the issue? What are you mad at, Canada? Folks, I implore you.
Mhm. I
I
think it's
implore you.
this is an awkward conversation because you're right now you're not talking to any Canadians. So like
No, I'm
we
talking to my
need to.
listeners.
I know we need to develop our content around people who we think might have friends in Canada.
Should we name every episode from this point moving forward something to do with Canada?
Hmm.
Just
Um,
until someone from Canada listens?
right, right.
No, we can't do that
Okay.
because that doesn't pay homage and respect to the millions of
To the
listeners
people
that we
that
have
do.
right
Yes,
now.
right. Um,
Listen,
whew,
folks,
yeah.
listen. If you have a friend in Canada, if you've got a relative in Canada, if you know just of an address
Hmm.
in Canada, if you stumbled upon a phone number that's
Hmm.
in Canada, call it.
It's time to start cold calling
It's
Canada.
time. It's
Yes,
time to cold call Canada.
yes. I think we just found the name of this podcast
Yeah.
or of this episode.
Folks,
So,
I'm asking you to unite.
hmm,
Cold call Canada.
hmm,
And just when they answer, you just say, hey, friendly American here,
hmm,
wondering if you've listened to the Leadership for Life podcast. It'll change your life.
hmm.
Two guys, two
Yeah.
guys that just want to help you reach your potential. Give it a shot, folks, please. And if you cold call someone, if you reach out to someone, if you email someone, if you've got a friend or relative, I want to hear from you. Please email me.
Yes.
Let me
Yeah.
know what's happening out there. We've got to
Hmm.
get Canada on this list. I
Right.
don't know.
It
I don't know
feels
what.
like very low hanging fruit. Like it feels like this should have been. We should have gotten Canada like episode 3. You know.
Yes, it's not like they're far away.
Right. It's common language.
I can drive there.
Right. Yeah.
Is there a language barrier? No,
Right.
not at all.
Hmm.
Do we dislike Canada? Not at all.
No, Montreal Expos, my favorite baseball team growing up.
See?
Yeah,
Do you hear that, Canada?
right. Again,
Do you hear that?
not sure they're listening, but your point is well made that yes, this should be. We talked about goals in the previous episode. I think this is a very worthwhile goal. Add Canada.
We've got to add Canada.
Yeah,
We've got to add Canada, folks. All right.
yeah.
I'll get off that soapbox. Folks, please unite. Let's get Canada. Listen, they deserve it. They need it.
That's
They need it, folks.
they're
They
good.
deserve this.
They are good, honest, beautiful people, and
Yes.
yeah, it's wrong for them not to have access and or I guess they have access. It's wrong not for, for them to be enjoying and learning from what we're sharing.
Do they not deserve to reach their potential? Of course they do.
Right.
Of course
Yes.
they do.
Yeah.
Of course they do. Listeners, my friends, you can impact the lives of Canadians everywhere.
Hmm.
All right.
My sense is once it lands, it's going to spread like wildfire, right? But
Yeah.
it's just cracking that market.
Yeah. It's a tough market to crack for some reason.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
don't understand it.
Hmm.
Chuck, we have listeners in Czechoslovakia.
Right. Yes.
Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Czechoslovakia, not Canada.
Right. I don't know. Yeah.
All right, folks. Chuck, is that about it for us?
I think that's it. Yep.
Folks, thanks for joining us. I really do hope that for longtime listeners, it was great for you to kind of revisit the idea of the podcast and where we've come from. And Chuck, I think this is really the first time we've really given you like a real introduction. I think when we joined, I just took for granted that people knew who you were because I talked about you and always thanked you on the podcast. But it's great for
Right.
you to really introduce yourself. And for new listeners, I hope that you found this beneficial, that you can really understand where we're coming from. Folks, thanks for listening. Thank you so much for giving us just a little bit of your time. As always, we are always here to help. We'll talk to you next time. Go Canada.